Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture your car for a second, an old one. Maybe it's, I don't know, a beat-up sedan with 150,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
You look at the tires, and, the tread is bald.
Right.
You look at the brake pads, they're worn down to the metal. It's just simple physics, right? Friction causes things to degrade. Things wear out.
It's the second law of thermodynamics in action. Entropy.
Yeah.
Things fall apart.
And for as long as I can remember, I've applied that exact same logic to my knees and my back.
Yeah.
And I think, well, most people do. We have this wear and tear model of aging.
We do.
You have a finite number of steps or jumps or miles in your body, and once you use them up, that's it. You're done. Your parts are just worn out.
It is the prevailing narrative. You hear it all the time, right? I've got bad knees because I played football. Or, oh, I'm just getting old. The cartilage is gone. It's a very fatalistic way to view biology.
But the research you brought in today, it completely flips that on its head. In fact, if I'm reading this right, it suggests that the car tire analogy isn't just a little bit wrong, it's actually dangerous.
It is.
But I have to play devil's advocate here immediately. Are you saying wear and tear isn't real? Because, bone bond arthritis certainly feels like wear and tear.
It feels like it, yes. And look, eventually, if you ignore the system long enough, you do get that damage. But the dangerous part of the analogy is that it leads to exactly the wrong behavior.
Okay.
The sources we're looking at today, and these range from mechanical engineering papers to, advanced joint physiology, they argue that your joints are not primarily wearing out. They are drying out.
That is a massive distinction. Wearing out implies permanent structural damage. Drying out, that implies a maintenance issue.
Exactly. If a gear is worn down, you need a new gear. You need surgery. You need a replacement. But if a system is just dry, if the tribology, that's the study of friction, wear, and lubrication, if that's just off.
Then you just need to restore the fluid dynamics.
You just need to restore the fluid dynamics.
Tribology. Okay. I feel like we're already drifting away from a doctor's office and into like an engineering lab.
That's the goal. For this deep dive, I really want us to stop thinking like doctors and start thinking like hydraulic engineers. We aren't looking at symptoms today. We are looking at a mechanical failure in a high-performance system.
So the mission is to figure out why we get stiff, why we get rusty, and why, according to this data, that rust isn't a life sentence. But I want to be specific. Is this just about drinking more water? Because if the solution is stay hydrated, that's going to be a pretty short deep dive.
It is definitely not just about drinking water. You could drink 5 gallons of water a day and still have dry knees. This is about retention and the specific fluid physics that happen inside a sealed capsule.
Okay.
We're going to map out the human hinge, explain why your joint fluid is actually smarter than any oil you'd put in a car, and talk about a feedback loop that can physically reverse that feeling of age.
Let's get into the hardware then. Section 1. If I'm the listener and I'm looking at my knee, I usually just visualize 2 bones rubbing together, which, makes me cringe.
Yeah.
How should I be visualizing this mechanical system?
Let's just purge that bone-on-bone image. It's inaccurate for 99% of people until the very, very end stages.
Okay.
Think of an engineered hinge like you'd see on a heavy bank vault door or high-end aerospace equipment. You have the hard components, the bone, but they are capped with cartilage.
The shock absorbers.
Right. But cartilage isn't just a rubber bumper. It's a porous, living tissue. Then, wrapping the whole joint, you have the joint capsule. And lining that capsule is the synovial membrane. This is your factory.
The factory that makes the oil.
Correct. It produces synovial fluid. And this fluid is the star of the show. In a healthy joint, there is a micro-thin layer of this fluid separating the bones. They never actually touch. They float.
Okay, but here's the part that confused me in the reading. We usually think of cartilage as this hard, white, slippery stuff.
Yeah.
Like the end of a chicken bone.
Mm-hmm.
But the source material compares it to a sponge, a high-performance sponge. That implies it's soaking things up.
This is the most critical concept to understand about joint health. Most people don't know this. Cartilage is avascular.
Avascular meaning no blood supply.
No blood supply, no veins, no arteries run into your cartilage.
So how does it eat? How does it get nutrients if there's no blood bringing them in?
Yeah.
If I scratch my skin, it bleeds and it heals. If I damage cartilage, how does it repair itself without blood?
That's where the sponge analogy comes in. It relies on a process called imbibition.
Okay.
Think about a wet sponge in your hand. If you squeeze it, That's compression. The wastewater pushes out.
Right.
And when you let go, decompression, it creates a vacuum. It sucks fresh water back in. That is exactly how your knees work.
No way.
When you take a step, gravity squeezes the waste fluid out of the cartilage. When you lift your foot, the cartilage expands and sucks nutrient-rich synovial fluid back in.
So movement isn't just using the joint. Movement is the pump.
Movement is the circulation system. If you don't move, the cartilage doesn't eat.
This is why the wear and tear theory is so damaging. If I think my knees are like tires, I park the car to save the tread. I stop moving to save my knees.
And by doing that, you starve the cartilage, you stop the pump, the sponge dries out, becomes brittle, loses its shock absorption, and then you get damage.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. You rest to save the joint, and the rest is what kills the joint.
Wow. So the stiffness comes from the starvation, not the usage.
Precisely. It's a hydration issue driven by a lack of mechanical pumping, but it's also about the fluid itself. It's not just water going in and out. It's a very specific chemical cocktail.
That brings us to the fluid itself, synovial fluid. I always assumed this was just biological water, plasma or something. But the notes here highlight a term that sounds like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. Non-Newtonian fluid.
It's my favorite physics concept in the human body.
Break that down for us. What makes a fluid Newtonian versus non-Newtonian?
So, water is Newtonian. It behaves predictably. If I stir a cup of water slowly or if I stir it really fast, the thickness, the viscosity doesn't change. It's always just water.
Right. Makes sense.
Synovial fluid breaks the rules. It changes its physical structure based on the shear force that's applied to it. It adapts instantly to what you are doing.
Give me an example. How does that look in real life? Is it like that cornstarch experiment kids do in school, where you punch it and it turns into a solid?
It's actually the opposite of that. That cornstarch experiment, that's shear thickening. When you hit it, it gets hard. Synovial fluid is shear thinning.
Okay, so walk me through the mechanics of that.
Imagine you're standing still, you're walking very slowly. The shear force is low.
Yeah.
In this state, the synovial fluid becomes thick and viscous. It turns into a heavy gel.
And why would it do that?
To separate the bones, it prioritizes cushion and stability. It becomes a static shock absorber, basically pushing the bones apart so you can stand without grinding.
Okay.
But let's say you suddenly break into a sprint, or you throw a punch. High velocity.
High shear force.
Instantly. I mean, in milliseconds, the fluid structure collapses and it becomes thin. It becomes slippery, almost like water, to reduce drag and allow high-speed movement without friction.
So it's smart oil. It knows when I need a pillow, and it knows when I need a slip and slide.
It is the ultimate adaptive material, and this is why the engineering comparison is so apt. The source material uses the car engine analogy again, but in a different way this time.
Yeah, I saw that. It's not about the tires wearing out. It's about the oil pressure.
Right. If your engine oil's low, or if it's old and degraded, thin and watery, the engine doesn't just explode immediately. But what happens?
It runs rough, it grinds, it gets hot.
And that grinding in the engine, that is exactly what stiffness feels like in the body. When your synovial fluid loses that adaptive magic, when it can't switch between cushion and glide, you feel mechanical inefficiency.
So let's pivot to the million-dollar question. Why does the oil degrade? If the body is this perfect machine, why does my knee feel different at 45 than it did at 25? Is it just that I'm not drinking enough water? Because we touched on that,
Yep.
but I need to understand the root cause here.
It's not about systemic hydration, like you can't just chug a gallon of water and fifth your knee. It's about local retention. It's about the chemistry of the fluid itself inside that capsule.
The sources list a few culprits here. The big one seems to be hyaluronic acid. I see that on my wife's face cream bottles all the time. Plumps the skin.
It's the same molecule, different location. Hyaluronic acid, or hyaluronin, is a moisture magnet. It is one of the most hydrophilic molecules in nature. A single molecule can hold up to 1,000 times its weight in water.
1,000 times.
Yes, it is the goo factor. In your joint, hyaluronic acid is what gives synovial fluid its thickness. It's what allows it to be that shock-absorbing gel. Without it, the fluid is just water. It just splashes away when you need cushion.
And I'm guessing production of this stuff drops off a cliff as we age.
It's a steep decline. By the time you're 50, your body might be producing half the hyaluronic acid it did when you were 20.
So the fluid gets thin, it can't hold water, the sponge dries out.
And then you have microinflammation, often caused by diet or lifestyle, that degrades the fluid even faster. But here is the fascinating part, and this was the aha moment for me in the research.
Yeah.
The stiffness you feel. That I can't get out of the chair sensation. That isn't usually the joint itself. That is your muscles.
Wait, Explain that. If my knee is dry, why are my muscles the problem?
It's a compensation mechanism. It's called muscle guarding. Think about it. If a hinge on a door is rusty, you have to push harder to open it, right?
Of course.
Your body is smart. It senses that the lubrication is low. It senses increased friction. So the nervous system sends a command to the muscles surrounding the joint. Lock it down, stabilize this, don't let it move freely because we don't have the protection.
So that feeling of tightness, like my hamstrings are tight or my back is stiff, is actually my muscles hitting the brakes.
Exactly. You are driving with the parking brake on. The muscles are working overtime to force movement through a dry system. That fatigue, that heaviness, it's just mechanical inefficiency.
That completely reframes the experience of aging. It's not that I'm weak, it's that my body is fighting its own friction.
You're working twice as hard to do half as much. And this is where tribology comes back in. Friction creates heat. Heat creates inflammation. Inflammation degrades the fluid further. It's a vicious cycle.
So how do we take the parking brake off? The source material mentions that the research landscape on this is shifting. We aren't just looking at painkillers anymore.
No, painkillers are irrelevant here. They mask the signal. They don't fix the friction. If your car engine is making a noise, turning up the radio doesn't fix the engine.
Great analogy.
The new wave of research they're calling lubrication biology is coming out of major institutions. Places like Yale and Harvard are looking at the molecular signaling around the cartilage.
They're focusing on the environment, not just the structure.
Correct. They're studying how to restart that factory we talked about, the synovial membrane. How do we trigger it to produce more high-quality hyaluronic acid?
And this brings us to the specific application mentioned in the sources, biodynamics joint genesis. Now, I want to be clear to the listener. We're looking at this as a case study of this new science.
Right.
What makes this approach different from, say, just taking a standard glucosamine pill? Is it just a different brand of the same stuff?
That's a valid question. Standard supplements usually try to provide raw building blocks, like throwing bricks at a construction site and hoping a wall gets built.
Okay.
Glucosamine and chondroitin are building blocks for cartilage. They are useful, but they don't necessarily address the fluid.
So they build the sponge, but they don't add the water.
Exactly. The biodynamics approach, based on the literature, targets the lubrication. It's designed to support the production of hyaluronin. It uses a matrix derived from rooster combs, actually, which is incredibly rich in it, combined with specific antioxidants.
Rooster combs, that sounds very old school medicine.
It does, but it's actually cutting-edge extraction. The goal stated in the research surrounding it is synovial fluid optimization. If you can restore the viscosity of the fluid, make it thick and adaptive again, you rehydrate the sponge.
So instead of trying to patch the tire, it's trying to refill the oil.
That's the analogy. It's about restoring the internal environment so the joint can glide, rather than forcing flexibility on a dry system.
And when that happens, when you actually rehydrate that system, the results described are pretty specific. People don't just say, my pain is gone. They say things like, I feel lighter, or movement is smoother.
Less effortful. That was the phrase that stuck out to me. And that makes perfect sense mechanically. If you reduce the drag, you reduce the effort. But more importantly, when you restore that glide, you trigger a neural shift.
The brain takes the parking brake off.
Yes. This is the protect versus move switch. Your nervous system has sensors inside the joint called proprioceptors. They are constantly reporting the status of the joint to the brain.
So if they report dry, grinding friction.
The brain screams, protect, and tightens the muscles. It limits your range of motion. It literally stops you from moving fully to prevent damage.
But if they report smooth, gliding, hydraulic.
The brain says move freely. It relaxes the surrounding muscles. The stiffness vanishes not because the bone changed, the bone is the same, but because the alarm system turned off.
This leads to the final concept in the research, which I think is the most hopeful part of this whole deep dive, the hidden feedback loop.
This is the key to reversing the spiral. Usually people get stiff, so they stop moving. They think, oh, I need to save my joints.
Right.
That makes them drier, which makes them stiffer. It's a death spiral for the joint.
Use it or lose it.
But the reverse is true. This is the positive loop. Let's say you intervene. You optimize the fluid, maybe through nutrition or targeted supplementation like we discussed, and hydration. You get a little bit of glide back.
So movement feels easier.
Right, because it feels easier, you move more, you take that extra walk, you play with the kids, you squat down to pick something up instead of, bending over at the waist.
And because movement is the pump.
That extra movement physically pumps more nutrients into the cartilage via that imbibition process we talked about. It stimulates the synovial membrane to produce more fluid.
Which makes movement even easier.
Exactly. You turn the death spiral into a life spiral. You just need to get the flywheel spinning.
It's really about momentum. It's not about fighting a losing battle against entropy. It's about restarting a machine that desperately wants to run.
The body is designed to move. It craves movement. We just have to give it the hydraulic fluid it needs to do the job.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up and put a bow on it for the listener. We've covered a lot of ground from non-Newtonian physics to rooster combs. If we had to distill this entire deep dive into one takeaway, what is it?
It's this. Your body is a hydraulic system, period. If the fluid levels are optimal, the heavy machinery feels weightless. If the fluid degrades, friction takes over.
And the solution isn't to park the car in the garage.
Never park the car, check the oil, support the fluid dynamics, and the system will run.
It really challenges that idea that feeling good just means numb. I think a lot of us settle for just not hurting. We pop an ibuprofen and call it a day. But this suggests we should aim for mechanical efficiency.
A well-oiled machine is quiet, it's smooth, it's powerful. That is what healthy aging should feel like. It shouldn't be a struggle, it should be a glide.
Before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a thought that hit me when we were talking about that neural tension. The idea that our brain is technically limiting us.
It's a powerful concept.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own limitations right now. That hesitation before you run for the bus, that groan when you get off the couch. How much of that is a physical hard limit? And how much is just your brain slamming on the brakes because it detects a dry system?
And if you release that brake, what could you physically achieve?
Exactly. You might not be as old as you feel. You might just be a little dry. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.